G'day once again guys, KennyRaceBoy here coming at you with another video. This one is about the K100 once again. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the pump on the bike. It's got a few weird things going on with it, and it does also have an oil leak, so we're going to check it out, pull it all apart, and probably fix it, hopefully. So yeah, come along for the journey, let's get to it. So currently my K100 is in a bit of a sorry state. As you can see, she's dropping oil all over my garage floor. Inspecting the underside of the bike, we can see where the origin of this oil is coming from. There's supposed to be a drain hole at the front of the sump, but it looks like the previous owners plugged it with a bolt, as an attempt to stop the flow of oil. Obviously it's not supposed to be like this, so a disassembly and an inspection of this pump is in order. Older K100s like this 1987 model are somewhat known for having this issue, and it can be a sign of a failed pump shaft seal. Fortunately, the remedy for this is a fairly easy process and can be completed over a weekend. First thing I'm going to do is remove the rogue bolt placed in by the previous owner, as it should have never been needed in the first place, and I'm going to throw it in the bin where it belongs. Next on the agenda, I'm going to remove the oil from the bottom of the sump. Using a 6mm Allen key, make sure the tool is properly seated in the bolt so you don't strip it out. Once the oil has been drained, it's time to drain the coolant as well. Located under the tank is the coolant fill port. Undo the coolant cap to help drain the cooling system. Once this is done, there's a coolant drain plug located under the pump. Once the coolant has finished draining, undo the band clamp and remove the hose. It's now time to remove the faceplate off the pump. Simply remove the 9 bolts holding in the faceplate. You can gently use a pry bar to remove a stubborn faceplate. With the faceplate successfully out of the way, there are 7 bolts holding the rest of the pump. Be sure to keep track of where these bolts have come from, as some of them are different lengths, particularly the bolts internal to the pump. With the rest of the bolts removed from the pump, it is now ready to be removed. Once again, you can gently use a pry bar to help this process. With the pump removed, we can now inspect the drain hole. As the drain hole was previously sealed, we can now see that there was plenty of debris inside the drain hole, which is characteristic for a failed seal. With the pump now removed from the bike, it's now time to remove the impeller and driven gear. With a 6mm Allen key and a 13mm socket wrench, we can now loosen the bolt for the impeller. Placing the pump on top of a vise, we can now use the loosened bolt to tap out the shaft from the impeller, whilst taking care not to damage the internals of the pump. Once this is done, the impeller should come free of the shaft. Early versions of the K100 came with this cast iron impeller, which in later models was changed out to a stamped steel impeller. It can be quite difficult to find the older style seal to suit the old impeller. So today we're going to opt for the newer style impeller with its improved seal. To ensure the impeller fits the shaft, the use of a spacer is required. After the impeller has been removed, it is time to remove the shaft. Employing the same technique as before, tap on the shaft until it has become free. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon to have a worn impeller shaft. This can be the result of a damaged seal and years of service. If your impeller shaft looks like this, then I would suggest that you get a new one. Once the impeller shaft has been removed, it is time to replace the seals. Removing the seals is pretty straightforward. Simply using a screwdriver and a hammer, you can tap out the seal, taking care not to scratch the seat where the new seal will sit. It doesn't really matter if you damage the old seal, as we're going to be replacing it. Once the larger coolant seal has been removed, also make sure to remove the smaller oil seal. Using the same method as before, it's also a very easy seal to remove. With all the seals removed from the pump, it's now time to install the new ones. As always, I've put some links in the description below for the parts required to complete this job. The first thing we're going to replace is the O-ring on the drive shaft. Next, we can now use an 18mm socket to press in the new oil seal. Applying a small amount of grease to the seat will aid in fitting the new seal. Using a mallet, you can gently tap the oil seal in, periodically making sure that the seal is going in square. Next, you can insert the driven gear and shaft into the pump assembly. Once this has been installed, we can now fit the new coolant seal. By far this is the trickiest part of the whole operation, but with the use of a tool it becomes a whole lot easier, as this tool directly interfaces with both sides of the seal. Using this tool and a mallet, gently tap until the seal has made full contact with the pump. You can periodically check the seal to make sure it is going in square. With the coolant seal in place, it's now time to fit the impeller. Using the spacer and impeller, place them both onto the shaft. Using copper anti-seize grease is a good measure to stop these bolts from seizing. It's also good practice to replace this bolt whilst rebuilding this pump. Once this bolt is in, tighten it down to 33 Nm. Then make sure that the impeller and gear spins freely. The drive gear is now ready to go in. Apply a small amount of oil to the shaft and install it into the pump. Make sure to insert the drain plug, tightening this down to 9 Nm. Clean all gasket surfaces free of oil. With the pump clean, you can now apply a small amount of gasket maker to the flange. At the engine block, replace the coolant O-ring. The pump is now ready to go back onto the bike. Route the oil pressure switch through the pump body. Simply align the pump shaft and wriggle it back onto the engine. You can now refit the pump bolts and tighten these down to 7 Nm. Before we put the pump lid back on, make sure that the oil pressure switch is plugged in. The cover is now ready to go back on. Apply some gasket sealer to the cover to make sure it seals. Place the cover back on the pump and tighten these bolts down to 7 Nm using a cross pattern. Refit the coolant hose back onto the pump and tighten down the band clamp. All there's left to do now is put fluids back into the bike. Use coolants especially formulated for aluminium engine blocks. A K100 will take 3.5 litres from empty and a K75 will take 3. Oil grades entirely depend on your use case, but you can use this simple chart to decide what kind of oil you'll need. Today we're using a 20W50 SAE oil. If a new oil filter is installed into the bike, it'll take 3.75 litres. However, it's a much safer bet to use the oil sight glass and fill it to 3/4 full. With new coolant and oil, the bike is now ready to go. So that pretty much does it for today, guys. We've changed a lot of parts on the K100 today. Hopefully we've learned a few things. Hopefully she's water and oil tight now. But yeah, if you have any questions, tell me below. Comment, rate, subscribe. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Happy riding.